4 to 9 p.m., inshallah, where there will be a variety of vendors. There will be various activities for the whole family, so please just mark that date for now. Again, it will be Saturday, August 27th. It will be here from 4 to 9 p.m. And there's also a new event called the 114 event. This is a spiritual and physical challenge that combines both running and Quran memorization. This event will take place on September 24th and September 25th in Saddle River County Park, and there's more information on this event on the ICPC website. So with that, we can get started with the questions. If anybody has any questions, they can send the questions to 862-208-3638. The number is right there on the display. Feel free to text your questions. We can also take some questions for anybody that would like to ask the questions live.
Jazakallah khair, akhina. Barakallah feek. And Jazakumullah khair everyone for attending. We'll start off with dua. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد أشرف الخلق سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا وعافنا واعف عنا وتجاوز عن سيئاتنا اللهم اغفر لصغيرنا وكبيرنا وذكرنا وانثانا وشاهدنا وغائبنا اللهم ربنا اهدنا إليك اهد قلوبنا إليك خذ بأيدينا إليك أخذ الكرام عليك بارك اللهم لنا في أعمالنا وأعمالنا وأرزاقنا وأهلنا وذوينا وأحبابنا اجعل لنا من كل ضيق مخرجا ومن كل هم فرجا واجعل لنا من بعد العسر يسرا دبر لنا فإننا لا نحسن التدبير وقدر لنا فإننا لا نحسن التقدير اللهم حبب إلينا الإيمان وزينه في قلوبنا وكره إلينا الكفر والفسوق والعصيان واجعلنا من عبادك الراشدين والله we call upon you, we pray to you, we beseech you, we ask you by your names and attributes that you guide us and that you inspire our hearts and that you fill our hearts with your abundant mercy and to fill our homes with your abundant mercy and to make us of those who love you and love your Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and love our deen. We ask you Allah to fill our hearts with your love and the love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and to make that a means to our salvation on the Day of Judgment. We ask you to bless this space, to bless this community and to bless this masjid and to make this space a space of dhikr and ibadah, a place of knowledge and activism and service and to make it a beacon of light and guidance for everyone who comes to it. Allahumma ameen. We ask you Allah to make the best of our actions, the last of our actions, the best of our days, the last of our days and the best day of all, the day we meet you and you're pleased with us. We ask you Allah to give us goodness in our health and in our wealth and in our lives and our livelihood and in our children and our families and our community and our ummah. We ask you Allah to better our condition as an ummah as we enter this new year, the year 1444 from the Hijrah. We ask you Allah to give us the best that is in this year and to make us of your excellent servants in this year. We ask you Allah to make the best of all days the day that we are granted admission into Jannah without any recompense, without any accountability. Allahumma ameen, Allahumma ameen. Wa akhir da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. As a reminder for you all, we just started the new Muslim calendar year, the new Hijri year. This is actually the first Friday in that Hijri year, and we're in this blessed month, one of the sacred months. This month is the month of Muharram. We also make dua for one of the brothers in our community who passed away today. His name is Shadi Abu Hadba, a young man, relatively young in his 40s, passed away from cancer. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to bring his family ease and to have mercy upon him and to elevate his status. Allahumma ameen, Allahumma ameen. And most likely his janazah will be tomorrow in Masjid Umar. So we can get started. I'm ready to get started with the questions, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah. Bismillah. So the first question is a little bit of a heavy one, but it's related to the topic that we discussed last week, Shaykh, on abortion. Yeah. So the question says, in terms of the discussion, if you are the medical professional in charge of performing the abortion procedure, do the same guidelines, acceptable reasons for abortion apply to you? Is it murder if you perform the abortion outside the accepted reasons?
Yeah, that is a tough question, and it belongs to a set of questions that relate to our current reality This reality is one in which we operate in a, you know, in a environment, in a community and society that doesn't necessarily spawn from Islamic values. And it absolutely, in many cases, it absolutely does not spawn from Islamic values. Sometimes it conflicts with that, and it causes a great deal of confusion, distress for Muslims in their workplaces. I guess, as a general statement, we do not dictate this reality. You know, we cannot change the medical system and its dynamic. Yeah, I could choose, and this is a very important note here, yeah, I could choose where I put myself in that spectrum, because many jobs you get now in the marketplace are going to have some element of questionable activity. Sometimes it's minimal, sometimes it's the primary basis of this work. You know, just as a general advice that I share with people, try your best to choose a career in a field that will be least compromising to your values. It's really important to consider your values when you choose your source of income for years to come. You know, and you know, that absolutely makes sense. So like for someone who believes that riba, for example, is haram, if you choose to work with the interest-bearing transactions as like a teller, for example, or as a investment banker or something like that, then of course you're choosing a career that's going to make you involved in riba day in and day out. Now, when I mean minimal, like say for example, if you take the banking industry and you work in something that has nothing to do with those interest-bearing transactions, like in security, cyber security, or in IT, or something like that, then even if there's some minimal area of questionable activity as being part of that institution, what you're doing is not haram. Your agreement with this institution that does a lot of other things that are questionable according to your principles is not haram. وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. One burden will not be carried by another. So what you choose should be something that is minimally questionable, if not questionable at all. That's really important to consider. So if someone hears what we said last week and decides to seek a job at an abortion clinic. You're working at an abortion clinic, what do you think? You're going to be able to avoid who's coming in and who's coming out? That's not necessarily a good idea. But now in certain circumstances where it's secondary to your job, like you work in the ER or you work in the hospital, and most cases don't have to do with X, Y, or Z, that is questionable, but sometimes it happens, then in this situation, that's min umum al-balwa. That's from the difficulties and the general hardship that falls upon us in this time. If it's not the basis of the work, then I would say that it makes it less problematic. Just ask if the children could possibly be downstairs. Jazakumullah khair. Barakallah feekum. Tafadhal.
Okay, the next question is, okay, this is related to, also related to something medical, but it's on a different topic. Is it haram to donate your body for medical research after death?
So the body as a whole needs to be buried in the ground. But can you be an organ donor to donate your organs for science or for the use by another human being? The answer to this is, as long as it doesn't lead to muthla and the mutilation of the body outwardly, then this is okay and not problematic. There's fatwa from many fatwa institutions today that allow organ donating. Among them is AMJA, American Muslim Jurists of America. So there's no issue with being an organ donor, but you can't. The body itself needs to be buried. Yeah. There was one question that was sent like 2 days ago. If you look, it's about some hadith. Let me show you.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oops. That was the first question sent, just to give that person regard. Here you go.
Okay, so the question says, I've often heard the hadith that there are more women than men in Jahannam. Can you please discuss the context and explain this hadith?
Yeah, so this hadith belongs to a few hadiths that are, very much confused in our times, in our day and age. And it's really tough to address them because we're in a reality today that there is extreme tension between the genders. Gender wars and the whole gender roles and feminist movement and this and that. This type of hadith in this context today, is just so difficult to even hear for many Muslims. Now, of course, there's a few things. Is the hadith authentic? What is the hadith to begin with? What is the hadith? The Prophet ﷺ one time was addressing a group of women. He was addressing a group of women. He said, Ya ma'ashara an-nisa, tasaddaqna. He said to them, "O group of women, I encourage you to give sadaqah. Give a lot of charities. And then he goes on to say, فَإِنِّي رَأَيْتُكُنَّ أَكْثَرَ أَهْلِ النَّارِ. Because I have seen you to be the larger sum and the larger number of people from the residents of hell. Now, one of the women responded. Pay attention to this very carefully. One of the women responded and she said, بِمَ ذَلِكَ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. Why is that, O Prophet of Allah? So he said to her, and he listed a few reasons that would lead one, male or female, to enter hellfire. And then he said, تُكْثِرْنَ اللَّعْنِ, you curse and damn things a lot, and you تَكْفُرْنَ الْعَشِيرِ, and you reject that the goodness that was done, and he listed a few other things. Now, of course, this hadith at face value could be severely misunderstood if you don't know who Rasulullah ﷺ is, and if you don't pay attention to how this woman responded to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ as a person was someone who came with a message that liberated women big time. Everyone needs to know that. He, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, came to a people that treated women like property. Akhi Na'il, seriously, like property. They were inherited. If the husband would die, his family, this was before Islam, his family would have first rights to that woman. If any of them wanted to get married to her, they would, right? So, and she wouldn't inherit from him a dime, right? Because they would not give inheritance to children and women. He came to a society that women were very much like property and they were subjugated. And he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with his wives and with the women companions, he empowered them. He empowered them to take on leadership roles. And you see this with Sayyidah Khadija. No one should have this backward. The Prophet ﷺ, he wasn't weak when he sought emotional strength and financial support from his wife Khadija. The Prophet wasn't weak. The Prophet ﷺ was a very confident, very strong personality. Prophet ﷺ wasn't weak when he did that. He actually gave her a great deal of ownership to this message. She was one of his first supporters, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When she passed away, it was Amil Huzn. It was the year of sorrow when she and Abu Talib passed away. It was the year of sorrow. That shows you, and when he spoke about Khadija, he spoke with such love. إِنِّي رُزِقْتُ حُبَّهَا. I was blessed with her love. You know what? That wasn't just with Khadija, radiallahu anha. There were women companions who, again, also had leadership roles, like Nusayba bint Ka'b, like Salama, and like many others, like Asma bint Abi Bakr. These are women companions who had very illustrious lives. So the point here is, if someone looks at the hadith at face value, They're going to think the Prophet is generalizing and is putting down women and is speaking with such gender bias. But get this, the Prophet ﷺ wasn't addressing people in a reality that was hyperbolized. These subjects were hyperbolized and dealt with such tension and fueled with such hatred and anger and division. It wasn't a polarized reality. Where's the proof of that? He was speaking to women. One of those women absolutely did not take offense to what the Prophet said. If today someone hears this hadith, they'll disbelieve in hadith. They'll say, oh, this is a bunch of fake stuff that men made up just so they could project their power on women. That's what people would say today. If someone hears this and they don't believe in hadith, they'll say, I disbelieve in hadith. There's no way a prophet would say something like that. But this woman actually said, why is that, O Prophet of Allah? She recognized who was saying it and who he was as a person. And she wanted to see what was behind his statement, because it's known in our deen, there's no way that people would enter hellfire just because of their gender. Of course not. The Prophet ﷺ was giving them spiritual advice. Make sure you give a lot of sadaqah. In other situations, he was speaking to women in this situation. It was an intimate gathering. In other situations, he did the same thing to men. ادفعوا البلاء بالصدقة. Right? الصدقة تطفئ غضب الرب. The charity extinguishes the wrath of Allah Azza wa Jal. Push away hardships and afflictions from yourself by giving charities. He was giving them spiritual advice, and they understood this very well. They loved the Prophet ﷺ. You know, what's the proof of this? You guys want to know? Sorry, before I share the funny story, I know brothers love to go chill in the corners. Come forward, guys. We're still in a halaqah. You're not in a qahwa. Come forward. Come forward. Oh, everyone who doesn't have back problems, come forward. Let's see who have back problems. Let's see who has back problems. Let's see. Got one person who has back problems. Come forward. We're in a halaqah. Remember and don't ever forget we're in the house of Allah Azza wa Jal. And the malaika, inshallah, are surrounding us. The rahmah of Allah is descending upon us. We should be in a state of utter tranquility, seeking the ajr of this type of because it's one of the gatherings of, one of the gardens of Jannah, inshallah. It's one of the hilaq al-dhikr and hilaq al-ilm. You guys want to hear a funny story about the Prophet ﷺ and the woman? You know, he used to have a special halaqah just for women. And they would be able to express themselves, ask their questions, and he would give them that platform. And they would take full advantage of it. They would raise their voices and they would debate and discuss. And one time, Sayyidina Umar walked in and his jaw dropped. He was like, what are you guys doing? You're speaking to the Prophet of Allah in such a manner. And he began to raise his voice, and the Prophet ﷺ told him, and they got very scared. They got scared from Umar. Umar was an imposing presence. He was so imposing that later on during his khilafah, one time he spoke to a woman in a manner, and she was pregnant. She had a miscarriage from her fear of the situation, how it unfolded with Sayyidina Umar. So anyway, Sayyidina Umar had a very imposing presence. He didn't mean to cause that. He didn't want to terrify her, but that's who he was as a person. He was a strong man. And anyway, so he got so angry that they were overstepping their bounds with the Prophet ﷺ. Prophet ﷺ said, calm down, O Umar. Calm down, O Umar. Leave them be. So that's who the Prophet was. You know, when you have these types of shubuhat, unfortunately, you know what happens? Sometimes it happens in foolish circles, Muslim circles, where you'll find a lousy guy, foolish guy, that's what I'm going to call him, a foolish guy, using the hadith of the Prophet and say, oh, you guys didn't hear? You're going to be the most people in hellfire, huh? As though he's saved. You know, he's got a free ticket to Jannah just because he's a guy. You guys are going to be the most people in hell, right? Billah, this type of person needs to be reprimanded, to use the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ to put people down. That's not what this hadith is meant to do. So I hope this gives some eye and perspective into this. The Prophet ﷺ's reality wasn't gender driven. That's why the women companions, they didn't take it personally. They knew that he was trying to push them. He didn't literally mean that wallahu a'lam, it's not meant to be taken in such a literal stance that he counted the people of hell, and after a tally, the women were more than the men. That's not what's meant. It's meant to push these group of sisters who are sitting with him. Make sure you be very careful of these attributes, because if you do these things, it might lead you to be from the people of hell. People enter hell not because of their gender, because of what they do. And that's why in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said that the people of hellfire are kullu utullin jawadhin mustakbir. You want to know the people of hell? They are every arrogant, loud, and ostentatious and prideful individual. That's who the people of hell are. They're arrogant, prideful, loud, and argumentative people. Those are the people of hell. So Allah Alam, that's how it addressed this hadith, and I hope that quells it. So the Prophet is talking about characteristics. He's speaking to a group of women. He's warning them of these characteristics, and he's telling them that these are very commonly found among people, and for all intended purposes, since it was a women's gathering, a lot of women do this, just as a lot of men might do it as well. Yeah.
Jazakallah khair. Just so while we're talking about sometimes misunderstanding, or just in terms of making sure we have a right understanding of certain topics, this is a really good question came in terms of, in an age of having access to an overabundance of Islamic content, teachings online, how can someone have the ability to sift through Imam's Islamic teachings that aren't beneficial or harmful to the journey of learning the deen, especially as someone who is beginning to learn the deen?
So look, Jazakallah khair for the question. My advice would be, in our reality we have certain things that can absolutely benefit us, and those same things have proven to also have the potential to harm us. And what I mean is, traditionally speaking, knowledge was always taken through transmission. People wouldn't get their knowledge just from books. In fact, they warned from this idea, this approach to knowledge, dealing with knowledge as though it's just information. That could work for geography or algebra, mathematics, something like that. That could work for that. Yeah, it's just a set of information, equations, principles, and you learn them and you master them and you excel. But when it comes to deen, there's two aspects of it. There's learning that guidance, and then there's applying and living by it and incorporating it in your life, and learning how to transmit it and communicate it to others. All that incorporates so many aspects of our being: a spiritual side, a level of emotional intelligence, an intellectual capacity, and also having the intelligence to deal with people and know the wisdom, how to win over the hearts of people. All of this is incorporated in Islamic knowledge, right? So that's why they said in the past, لا تأخذ مصحفك من مصحفي ولا علمك من صحفي. They said this as in old. They said, don't ever take your mushaf, your knowledge of the Quran, from someone who just learned it by a do-it-yourself method. And don't ever take your knowledge from people who only have it from do-it-yourself efforts. Even though those efforts might be applauded, might be appreciated, knowledge is more than information. It's our spiritual pursuit. It's our spiritual journey. It's the way we choose to live our lives. And this was always done through suhbah, through companionship. Everyone needs that. So what I'm trying to say is, take benefit of listening to well-known, reputable speakers on YouTube. Listen to the lectures. Listen to different online courses that you find available. But that can't be the end of it. That can't be all you have. You should aspire for that idea of companionship that helps you become a better person. That will only happen through human interaction. That's why, something like this in the age of social media, we got the cameras going over there, YouTube, Facebook. Many people underestimate the importance of actually interacting physically with people, in person. Say, oh, it's okay, I'll sit in my living room and prop up my feet and have my snacks and just enjoy myself and listen to it. I don't need to go and deal with people. Who likes people? People are annoying, right? So, so I'm just joking, but that we can never escape that. So my advice to this person: benefit from reputable speakers. Be careful. There's a lot of things that are coming from unknown sources out there that are, destructive and toxic. But also search for what I'm talking about here, because that's where you'll find it'll fill all the gaps, because it'll give you something more than just information. It'll show you how to live by it. Allah Alam.
So if you're a beginner, just to kind of add to that question a little bit, if you're a beginner, it's obviously better to come to the masjid or learn the deen in a more interactive way. Absolutely. By coming to a halaqah or some kind of in-person event, in-person learning. But if you want to go on YouTube, for example, I'll say YouTube or Instagram, there's so much material, Shaykh. Like, how can you? Is there any advice in terms of red flags to look for, or are there any maybe certain websites or certain shuyukh that you think would be beneficial for that person that's asking this question?
Yeah, look, the recommendations are endless, and the warnings that you could possibly give, the red flags, like you say, are also endless. I'd rather not just give a list of recommendations of individuals, because you're always going to leave certain people out and that are really beneficial, that you could benefit from. It's just because there's just so much there. My recommendation would be, take what you have to your local imam, someone you trust, a mentor, a person of trusted knowledge, and present to them whoever you're listening to, what you're listening to. There are some red flags you could be aware of. Like if someone, and the more you would become aware of those red flags is when you learn about who the Prophet ﷺ was. If you know the Prophet's character and you see someone acting the direct opposite, then you know not to listen to that person. That if that person doesn't have the temperament of the Prophet, that person's shouting, yelling, cursing, putting people down, backbiting, all that kind of stuff, that's not someone you want to get your guidance from. Because that's totally against who the Prophet ﷺ was. So that's just a general guideline. Learn about the Prophet. It'll give you some insight into what to look for and what to avoid. And always take it back to in-person sources. If you search, you will find. Go to the masajid, go to places where you hear about respected and reputable people who have some track record, and you'll find them. Yeah.
Jazakallah khair. The next question, just switching topics. How should we react to the death of a non-Muslim friend? To what extent are we allowed to console them, and are we allowed to visit non-Muslim graves?
Look, I'll start with the tail end of that one. Visiting graves is primarily for the benefit of the living, and also perhaps some benefit to the deceased. When I go visit the grave, it helps me heal on the inside. It reminds me of Hadim al-Ladhat, the destroyer of pleasures. It helps me gain perspective on life. I should visit the graves. That's why I visit the graves. Now, of course, I visit the graves of the loved ones to make dua for them, perhaps, to perhaps read Quran in that presence, and can they benefit from that? A number of scholars addressed those types of things, among them Imam Ibn al-Qayyim, and he said they do benefit from that. But now when it comes to someone whom, at least as far as you know, died upon disbelief, there are certain boundaries Allah Azza wa Jal has placed for us, that we cannot make supplications and dua for those who passed on. Their matters to Allah. I cannot, that's from the unseen realm. I cannot, they're with the best of judges. I'm not going to say this person is in hell or this person's in Jannah, because that's not for me. It's not for me to say this person's in Jannah or hell. I could say in terms of ahkam ad-dunya and the worldly rulings, this person, if he actually died upon disbelief or she actually died upon disbelief, Allah has prohibited me from making prayers for this person. So then in that sense, what would you visit the grave for? Is it a reminder for yourself or a benefit for the person in the grave? If it's a benefit for the person in the grave, then if he died upon disbelief, you will not be able to benefit them. If it's a reminder for yourself, then so be it. Remind yourself by visiting all the graves. That's fine.
Jazakallah khair. Just sifting through the questions. Just give me a second. Okay. So there's a couple of finance-related questions.
You can ask them directly too if they want.
Yeah, I guess maybe we'll just take a few minutes. Is there anyone that has any question that they'd like to ask in person?
Any direct
Brothers,
questions?
sisters?
Well, this is a very tricky thing. It's a very slippery slope. And the person needs to be careful because al-aslu fi dhunub as-satr. The default is that one should conceal sins, not publicize them. And I've seen this happen, and don't want to go in details, but sometimes, you think you're publicizing someone else's sin for the right reason to quote-unquote warn them, but it ends up blowing up in your face by, instead of them being warned, you actually made them doubt their deen. You actually made them have a negative reaction towards people who look a certain way or hold certain positions. And it's very catastrophic. It's happened so many times where people would attach their religiosity towards individuals, which is of course a severe flaw. It's a mistake. People are known by truth. Truth isn't known by people, right? But nonetheless, people do that, and then you come and topple these idols that they have in their mind, and you end up leaving them with such doubt in their faith, it might send them down a very negative thing. So, a negative path. So the idea behind publicizing sin is a very scary one. It's actually partly driven by the mode that we have in society, the mode of communication. Now, people today, if they want to push for a certain thing or push certain agendas or push people aside, they will quote-unquote put someone on blast. I'm going to put someone on blast. Fools, al-asaf, disgusting character that litters our social media platforms. I'm going to put people on blast, and I'm going to put this person down, and I'm going to... This is a very slippery slope. It's not something that's done easily. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ lived with the companions for how many years, right? For how many years, right? You find something very unique that... you guys know the story of the person who drank alcohol during the time of the Prophet ﷺ? You guys know that person? All right. Do you know his name? Who knows his name? Anyone knows his name? Right. There's great debate among the scholars of hadith on the name of this. They'll mention different possibilities. Is this person or that person or that person? And there's actually a few hadiths like this, where the identity of the one who committed the sin is actually unknown. That the Prophet ﷺ would come out and say, مَا بَالُ أَقْوَامٍ يَفْعَلُونَ كَذَا وَكَذَا. There's some hadith that we know the identity, like Sayyidina Ma'iz, for example, with the fornication, or Al-Ghamidiyya as well. We just know her as Al-Ghamidiyya. She committed fornication and she was held accountable for it. But in general, and we also know the story, there's a very famous story of the 3 companions who straggled behind. You guys know them? You guys heard the story before? Right? One of them who narrates the story, it's very long, His name is what? What's his name? No one? Ka'b ibn Malik. Sayyidina Ka'b ibn Malik. That's among a very short list of companions that we actually know their sin and it was publicized. But the default is you don't put people on blast. Or else that would have been found in so many hadiths, it would have been rich. Because did the companions commit a lot of mistakes? Yeah, they did. There was some kaba'ir and major sins that were done by some companions, right? So, that's not the mode of operating in our deen. I'm not telling you it's categorically there's no place for it at all, but it should be dealt with the utmost care. And as they say in the science of hadith about jarh, there's this, one of the sciences of hadith, it's called al-jarh wa ta'dil. It's about the narrators. When you want to speak positively about a narrator, that doesn't need an explanation, because the default in Muslims is that they're good. When you speak negatively about a narrator, saying reasons why he can't be accepted and his hadith can't be accepted, it needs to be mufassar. It needs to be explained. And when it comes to explaining the jarh, when you're saying that this narrator of hadith is not reliable, it needs to be absolutely limited to what is necessary to be said. You can't say beyond that, right? You can't say, like someone comes to you, and this applies to everything, by the way. Someone comes to you asking for advice. Should I, my daughter is gonna, brother so-and-so proposed to my daughter. Should I accept his proposal? And this person dislikes brother so-and-so, and he sees it, yes, good opportunity. I can mention everything bad about brother so-and-so. Oh, did you know brother so-and-so said this and did that and went here and went there and he was in a relationship? Is that okay? Absolutely not. You cannot expose the sins of people even in the realm of nasiha, except to the extent of what's absolutely necessary for them to make a decision. If he has 10 sins and if they just know about one of them, they'll turn away from this proposal. You must mention only one. Now, I don't mean to take too long on this question, but it's a very tricky thing. That's why I don't recommend it, and I think that usually when this stuff is done on social media, it's absolutely toxic. And I think that it should be reduced. All right? If you know that Fulan al-Fulani is actually influencing certain groups of people, go talk to those groups of people. Tell them, hey, you know what, I advise you X, Y, and Z. But to put a person on blast, you know what? Maybe, did this person have a proper hearing? Was there a proper judgment done of this case to determine whether this person is right or wrong, or an abuser or an abused person? Kada? Was there a proper judgment done? Allahu a'lam. That's why, this tongue is either for the person or really against them. When you speak about people, you should be very careful, because it could be really heavy against you on the Day of Judgment. Nasallahu salama.
Jazakallah khair. Maybe we'll take one question in person from the sisters. Any questions?
Go ahead. Yeah, I know it's one of the trials of our time, credibility, when you're talking about famous people and they're accused of X, Y, or Z, and you as a person have no way to verify. As the Prophet ﷺ, he said, there's a hadith, there's some weakness in the hadith, but he said, عَلَى مِثْلِ هَذَا فَاشْهَدْ أَوْ فَدَعْ. He pointed to the sun and he said, on something as clear as this, witness or leave it and abandon it. I might never reach to the reality of the matter in terms of the condition of so-and-so or so-and-so, and I cannot speak with certainty for their credibility. So it's always going to go back to that default unless I have clear proof as on a personal level to state to the contrary. And that's only fair to people. That's why this is actually taken from a verse of the Quran. You guys know the whole system of law that we have in terms of proving fornication is actually mostly a deterrent. It's mostly a deterrent because it's so difficult to achieve that. That's why usually in all the cases that you see coming to the Prophet ﷺ, during his lifetime of people who committed fornication, there are people who came admitting to it. That, as for 4 witnesses, look at what the Quran says in terms of the fornication. As an example, I'm using as an example fornication. فَإِذْ لَمْ يَأْتُوا بِالشُّهَدَاءِ لَوْلَا جَاءُوا عَلَيْهِ بِأَرْبَعَةِ شُهَدَاء. If only they brought 4 witnesses, and these 4 witnesses need to be of a particular caliber and say certain things and will be dealt with in a certain manner. فَإِذْ لَمْ يَأْتُوا بِالشُّهَدَاءِ. If they don't bring the 4 witnesses, then what? فَأُولَٰئِكَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ هُمُ الْكَاذِبُونَ. Those are the ones who by Allah they're liars. But why? They might not be liars. What if one person saw it and he's absolutely saying the truth? For all intended purposes, I'm going to consider what is being said an absolute lie if it doesn't meet this criteria. That's a high standard, because I'm not meant to be a judge upon people. I'm not meant to be in that position to be judge, jury, and executioner. In our society, this is one of the things that has decimated our society with the Me Too movement and everything associated with it, where people have made it okay for themselves to become judge, jury, and executioner just because they feel like it, not because they have actually proof to justify it. And many of those cases you'll find that actually it ends up showing with time that this person is exonerated, this person is released because of lack of evidence, and so on and so forth. That doesn't mean they're not necessarily guilty, but it means that Allah is al-Hakam. And if I can't figure it out, let me leave it to Allah. Because if someone escapes the judgment of this world, they will not escape the judgment of the hereafter. And that's okay. If I don't have everything figured out, that's okay. If someone is saying something good and that is in line with the words of the Prophet ﷺ, but someone said something about this person's credibility, you know what, I'm going to take the good and leave everything else. That's it. It's not my business. It's not my business to figure out the haqiqah. That's for the one who knows the haqiqah, the haqq. Al-haqq is one of Allah's names. He's the manifest truth. It's not my job. Yeah, Allah alam.
Jazakallah khair. So the couple of questions related to finance. The first one is making money off stocks haram, Shaykh?
Is making money off stocks haram? General like that? No, the answer to this is, look, can Muslims deal in the stock market? Yes, they can deal with certain conditions, right? It's a very detailed subject. It depends on the nature of the investment. Is it a socially responsible investment? If it is a socially responsible investment, how much of this company that I invested in, how much of its assets, how much of its debt to asset ratio amounts to things that are coming from haram sources? I can look at their books, and I have access to this information to figure out. And there's actually apps that help you do this. One of them is called Atina, A-A-T-I-N-A, I think. So it's called atina.co. If you look it up, you put the name of the app, it'll tell you. And there's other ones as well. There's multiple. If you want the specific apps, you can text this number later on, and I could send you the other apps that actually do the job for you. Like something like Wahid Invest. Have you guys heard of Wahid Invest? Wahid Invest. They're among a bunch of investment companies, Muslim investment companies, that operate seeking halal sharia portfolios. So you can deal in the stock market, and you'd have to give zakah on the stock market, and you'd have to make sure that that money is invested in halal. So yeah, you can make money through the stock market. It's not Some people have this illusion that it's like a form of gambling. I know it might look like that, but it's absolutely not that. You're talking about buying and selling assets. If investing in the stock market is gambling, then investing in any business is also like gambling, because it might fail or it might go up or down. It's not gambling. It's not a game of chance. Gambling refers to التردد بين الغنم والغرم, to be in a state of either loss or gain in games of chance, absolute chance, right? So that's about the stock market. There's rules and conditions for it. Go look it up. You could find some details again on MJ's website, American Muslim Jurists of America, about some advice in terms of halal stock investment. And again, you could look into Wahid Invest as an example. You could also look into a Zad fund, a Mana fund. There's a few options out there. Yeah.
Jazakallah khair. Another question, this time it's related to life insurance in terms of the permissibility to have a life insurance policy, especially the ones that say if there's a major disability that happened to you during, let's say, a 15-year term life insurance, you will get a large sum. So someone is just asking about the permissibility of having this.
So the subject of life insurance is also it's a big one. Not all life insurance policies are the same, and sometimes you get these life insurance companies, you get these life insurance policies as part of certain jobs that you take on. Like you sign an agreement with a certain company. Part of the perks that comes with working for this company is they'll have a life insurance policy for you. You're not really contributing to it. That type of thing is absolutely not going to be problematic, because you're not contributing anything to it. It's coming to you, just as a perk from your company. But when it comes to investing in life insurance, money and investing in life insurance, there's differences of opinion among scholars about some of these types that aren't as problematic, are not clear riba. So most scholars don't allow life insurance. Some scholars do allow life insurance. There's a minority of scholars. Among them is Shaykh Mustafa Zarqa, from some of the modern scholars of our time, very reputable, and Shaykh Muhammad Abu Zahra and Mustafa Zarqa, among the scholars who allow life insurance. So they're minority, but that opinion is out there. Wallahu alam.
Jazakallah khair. There's one question on a 401.
So basically, what do you do when you have a majority like this and a minority like that? The better thing for you to do would be to avoid the questionable and to be precautious. But sometimes some people, they don't consider it like that. They say, what's going to happen to my children after me? This and that. Is there a rukhsa? Is there a dispensation? There is this other opinion, and this is from the realm of khilaf that is permissible. It's not a clear-cut thing, or else these scholars wouldn't have had these opinions. But most scholars don't allow it. So it's really questionable, and it's better to avoid if you can. Yeah.
Jazakallah khair. One question on a 401k that has, part of it is bonds. The person's asking, would it be okay if you donate the returns from the bonds?
Yeah, investing in the bonds market is really problematic. Of course, I'm just speaking about this in general, not the question. Investing in the bonds market is very problematic because it's profit off of debt. And any profit off of debt and loans that are given is going to be riba. So the bonds market is problematic. But the stock market is different. So so in general, you can't invest in the bonds. Investing in bonds is not okay, unless they're from the Islamic sukuk. Sukuk, these are Islamic forms of bonds that are halal and allowable. There's a lot of detail there to be explained. But when it comes to your 401k, if there's certain elements in it that are, sometimes you can't decide what your company is going to invest in for your 401k. So what do you need to do? You look at the list of companies, figure out what are they investing in, and if it's something that's haram, then you need to discard that from your wealth. We don't consider it a charity, by the way. We don't consider it a sadaqah. It's something that you need to discard from your wealth to remove haram elements of wealth from your earnings. Allahu A'lam.
Another question, I think it's related to 401k. Is it haram to invest in a Roth IRA?
That's a type of IRA. I don't remember right now offhand like the details of it, but maybe perhaps I could address that offline. Yeah.
Okay, inshallah. There was one question on gambling. Let me just quickly pull it up. Sorry. So the question is, if someone is asking about it's haram to gamble, can you use that money to gamble again? Because technically that money won't be used anywhere else.
What?
So if you're gambling and you win, can you gamble again? Can you use that money solely to gamble more because you're only going to be using it for gambling?
No.
I think that's what it says.
No, of course not. Because the act of gambling is haram. So if you do that again, you just did haram again, right? You take that money and you get rid of it, right? Does anyone have direct questions they'd like to ask? Any direct questions? Go ahead. Yeah, we don't consider it a donation because a donation is an act of worship. This is haram money. You should have never had it. You can't do an act of worship with haram money. You need to get rid of it, or else you'll have sins for keeping it. You get it? So you don't need to tell anyone that this is from interest. You just get rid of it, give it to a common cause, a good cause, masjid or feeding the needy or whatever it is. Doesn't matter. You know, anything. Yeah. Allah Alam. Yeah. Can you give me an example? So they made money, they're like a real estate agent? So they're a real estate agent, they made their percentage off of the sale, right? You're saying, or whatever they're owed for making this deal, right? What should they get rid of, you said? Yeah, no, you're not going to look at it like that. This person did a service and he's getting compensated for that service. Has nothing to do with the transaction. However, like I said in the beginning, when you choose your career, try to choose something that doesn't compromise your values too much. And, just to be honest, if you choose to be a real estate agent, unless you're working for one of the Islamic banking companies, then you're going to be the one who's signing off on a lot of interest-bearing transactions, which could be really problematic. I know you'll have different takes on this based on the different shuyukh you might listen to, but it's a type of job that I would discourage, Wallahu A'lam. But anyway, so basically that's what it goes back to. This money this person gets is for a service. This service, is it halal or haram? That's what I was just discussing. If it's halal, you keep all the money. It has nothing to do with the amount of interest this person's going to pay. I'm getting money for the service. You get it? Wallahu A'lam. I think there was a question over here. I saw someone's hand up. No? Anyone has a question? Brothers?
So I have a question regarding interest, but for educational purposes. So are
Yeah. Yeah, no, this subject of student loans has been addressed so many times. Education is a need. They consider it as a general need. It doesn't mean, it doesn't matter if it's going to offer you income or not. Learning and educating yourself, and for the Muslims, gaining knowledge and growing their knowledge base is something that will ultimately further the cause of our communities and our ummah. So they consider it a need. And they say that taking these loans is allowed on the basis of need, meaning I need to pursue scholarships, grants, I need to reach out to places like a continuous charity to see if I could get a non-interest bearing loan, and I need to do everything in my power to try to figure out ways to avoid this haram, avoid the riba. And then if there's no way, and this is the only way I could get my education, then I can do that, with the understanding that I need to pay it off as soon as possible. As meaning top priority, meaning that after I graduate I shouldn't start lavishly spending on getting a new car, a new house, or going on vacations here or there. No, I should dedicate my time to getting rid of this loan so that it doesn't give me more interest. Wallahu a'lam. Yeah. Go ahead. Being like a silent partner? Well, if you get the loan from the bank, is it interest bearing? That's the answer. You're going to say, how am I going to grow my business? Well, you know what? Grow it within your means and you'll find barakah. A lot of people want to grow big really quick, and they want to take a big loan out from the bank so that they could start doing things quickly. What if I start small within my means, or try to get a qard hasan from someone who's wealthy within the community? Let me try to work within my means before I try to pile on the debt for the next 50 years of my life. Unfortunately, because people have become so loose with getting interest in our day and age and getting debts on their shoulders, it actually is a big stressor for people in their lives. Debts are a huge source of stress for people. And if people just chose to live within their means, it would relieve them of a lot of that. The Prophet ﷺ, he said this, for me to take a bundle of wood and go seek the sale of it in the market is better for me than asking people whether they'll give me or not. That's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. It truly is. Wallahi, it truly is. So I would not encourage that at all. Even though I know a lot of people do that, even though they're regular masjid goers and they're paying in the first row. But may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us and better us all. Ya Rabb. Sure. Is there any sisters' questions, or go back to the brothers? Any sisters' questions? All right, go back to the brother. Start attending salah كل صلاة in the masjid أريح لك يا عم الشيخ. روح شوف لك شيء. Pray 5 days salah 5 times a day in the masjid أريح لك. Okay? All right, go ahead, brother. Yeah, so look, Jazakallah khair. So look, living without credit cards in the West is extremely difficult. People do it, and mashallah, that's great, but it's extremely difficult for a number of reasons. Because if you don't have credit history, then it becomes very difficult to get a lot of things, like rent a car, or lease an apartment sometimes, or buy a house, or any of that stuff. Unfortunately, we don't choose the dynamics of the country we're in. So that's why the general fatwa today is one that allows the usage of credit cards within a certain parameters, right? Because the reason why credit cards are prohibited, they say it's haram li ghayrihi, haram due to other cause. What does that mean? It's haram because it might lead to actually paying interest. When you sign up for a credit card, you're not paying interest off the back, right? You might pay interest in certain circumstances, right? So it's haram li ghayrihi because it might lead to interest. So what they say is, you can open a credit card due to need, but you need to limit its use to the need. As best as you can, never go over the grace period where you're going to have to pay interest on it. Wallahu alam. So this fatwa is so common, so out there from many different sources. Again, if you're one of those few people who could live without a credit card, then mashallah, power to you. But most people can't do that. Yeah. Wallahu alam. Do we have more questions coming in from there? Let's take a break from the... Oh, sorry, go ahead. Ask your question, then we'll go back to the... Oh, you guys can't hear? All right, so the last question was about credit cards, the use of credit cards. I'll start repeating the questions. You wanted to ask something? Go ahead. So you used to work at a restaurant and you used to get tips, and some of those tips were coming from selling alcohol? Uh-huh. But would you also be serving them food? Okay, so obviously it's not a good job to have because you're directly dealing with something that's haram, like the alcohol and the wine. I would not recommend working in that type of place. But the tip you get has nothing to do with that alcohol, because you serve them a bunch of other things and the tip is like a gift. So it has nothing to do with it. That's not, you didn't sell the alcohol to them, right? So if you sold the alcohol to them, that would be a different thing. Wallahu alam. You want to read the questions there?
Yeah, I guess one question similar. So considering we live in a Christian country, is it okay if we eat non-zabiha food like McDonald's? Are we allowed to eat that, or should we just stick to only zabiha food?
I did not know
Surprised that. We lived in, I wasn't really, we lived in a Christian country.
I did not know America is a Christian country. I don't think it is, even though there's a large population of Christians in this country. I don't think it's a Christian country, especially because many people, even those who say they're Christian, don't necessarily believe in religion altogether. I don't think you define the country by its majority anyway, right? This country is secular in terms of its laws, and that's what defines things. So anyway, what was the question again?
About just whether it's
the
okay.
meats.
Yes,
Can you eat?
Meats, yes.
Can you eat McDonald's? Well, look. In general, the eating the meats of Ahl al-Kitab, the people of the book, is something that is allowable in our religion. Now, who are the people of the book, and under what circumstances can we eat those meats? That's where there's massive debate among the scholars. Some scholars are more restrictive in this regard, stating, like if someone tells me, you know what, I was born Christian, but I don't believe a single word of it. Is this a person that's from Ahl al-Kitab? Is this a person that's from the people of the book? Now, those people who are in these slaughterhouses, do you really know their religion? Now, again, there's a lot of and then forget about the religion aspect. How are these animals being slaughtered? Are they properly being slaughtered according to Sharia or not? This is so much. I'm not interested in having this debate now, because you might have it back and forth. I might be leaning towards one opinion. You might find another imam that's leaning towards another. But in general, what we look at is these things. Not only the identity of the person slaughtering, but the manner in which it was slaughtered. If you're telling me the cow its head was sliced off from the back to the front, that's not proper slaughtering. And that would make the meat like mayta, improperly slaughtered, hence you cannot eat it or come near it. I'll tell you, look, there are some people who have this debate who don't even pray. And you'd be surprised. It's very bizarre that someone would be so concerned about their meat, yet they do one of the biggest kaba'ir in the religion, they don't pray. Does this happen? Oh yeah. Yes, it's there. Because some people have approached religion from a very ritualistic standpoint. So this, you'll find acceptable realm of debate. Then forget about the way the meat was slaughtered. What is it being cooked with? This is like a whole other discussion about, let's say the meat is completely fine with all of the things mentioned above. Is there cross-contamination with bacon, with pork and all that stuff? Is this deep fried? Is the food deep fried in the same thing as pork or bacon or whatever? Is the grill clean for me to eat from as a Muslim? There's so much things that are questionable in this regard. So just as a general note, if you can be precautious, then be precautious. And alhamdulillah, in our reality, if you were telling me we're in the 70s right now or the 80s, and there's like very few Muslims, and there's like one halal restaurant on the East Coast, I'd be like, okay, I understand, it's such a difficult. Or if you tell me you're living in like the middle of nowhere, like I don't know, where there's very little Muslims, like Wyoming or something, I don't know. Like somewhere, Texas is loaded with Muslims.
A lot of Muslims in Texas.
A lot of Muslims in Texas. But like if you're living in like a place where there's no Muslim in like a few hundred miles, then I'd be saying, okay, I understand your difficulty. But if there's halal options that are properly and safely slaughtered with plentiful availability, then why are you choosing something questionable? Wallahu alam. It's a big area of debate. There's so many aspects to it. Again, the pork stuff, the wine stuff, the grills, all that stuff. And this is important because the Prophet ﷺ says in the hadith, أطب مطعمك تستجب دعوتك. Be conscious of of the sources of your consumption, and your prayer will be closer to being answered. So it does have that effect. Wallahu alam.
Jazakallah khair. Just want to make sure we get through everybody's questions. There was one question regarding the ruling of niqab. Is it mandatory?
Is it mandatory? There's a difference of opinion about it, and some scholars say yes, most scholars say no. Wallahu alam.
There's one question regarding using the term Islam as a religion of peace. So he's saying, my friends and family claim that it is just a propaganda spread in the Muslim community to make us weak and lower our jihad.
Lower our jihad?
Yeah.
Islam is a religion of peace. Yalla libado. Go to the next question. I believe it. Islam is a religion of peace. If this became propaganda as well, I don't know. I guess I bought into the propaganda. Yalla, next question.
Sure. One question was about. I'm just summarizing it. It's regarding when you're doing deeds and you feel like you're doing good deeds. How do you try to prevent yourself from becoming arrogant or having a sense of arrogance when you are performing those good deeds, or you just you've helped someone, or if you contributed to something in the community?
That's a really good question. If you do good deeds, how can you stop yourself from becoming arrogant? You do the opposite of what you're feeling, right? You do the opposite of what you're feeling. If you're worried about a certain disease of the heart coming inside, do the opposite, right? What does that mean? You feel like you're starting to show off with your actions. There's a lot of people are seeing your deeds and they're impressed with them, and you start doing things publicly for the wrong reason. What do? You start doing private actions that only Allah Azza wa Jal knows about. And the more you do private actions, the more you'll feel the sense of sincerity come inside the heart. So and then let's take arrogance. If you find yourself, you know, if you know your head becoming inflated with all of the goodness that you're doing, or مش عارف إيه, what do? Do things that humble you and that break that sense of arrogance. There was one scholar, one of our modern scholars. He was in a debate with an atheist, and he was able to utterly obliterate him in the debate, and everyone was singing his praises and saying, speaking so highly of this sheikh and this scholar, and he felt that began to get to him. So what he chose to do, he was driving back from this debate. He told his driver, please stop at a masjid. I need to use the restroom. So he went inside the restroom. He took a while. And the driver was worried something happened to him. So he went and checked on him, and he saw him cleaning the bathroom. And he asked him, why are you doing this, Sheikh? You're a world-renowned scholar and you're cleaning the bathroom. He said, I felt my nafs starting to take charge of me. When everyone began speaking so highly of me, I wanted to break it. I wanted to humble it, so I did something that's the opposite. I started cleaning the bathroom. Sometimes you need that type of thing to humble your nafs. Yeah. So do the opposite. You find yourself becoming envious of another person. You see this person's really successful, really good, really kada. You know what you do to combat that? You begin speaking highly of that person, saying good things about this person. Instead of allowing your heart to build envy towards that person, I'm gonna say good things about this person. I'm gonna say mashallah. I'm gonna say may Allah give this person. I'm gonna make dua for him or her, so on and so forth. You do the opposite of whatever is being triggered inside your heart. Yeah.
Jazakallah khair. I know you have a few more minutes left before Salat al-Isha. One question came up regarding marriage. What should you do when your parents disapprove of someone you want to marry?
Good question. What should you do? This is a big question. What should you do when your parents are disapproving of someone you want to marry? Look, you know, our family dynamics are really, really complicated. There's no clear course of action that applies in all situations. Each situation is very unique and needs to be dealt with in a unique way. And the reason why I say that is you have a lot of variables, a lot of things that should be considered. Is it important for my parents to be invested in my marriage? The answer is yes, it's really important. For brother or for sister, it's really good because, you know, there's so much stress on relationships already. Without any of those problems, many marriages do not succeed. To add more stressors onto it makes it more likely that it will fail. So you want to try to find a situation where you're starting out on solid ground, on good foundations, as best as you can. Now, that's one principle and one ideal. Should your parents be allowed to force you to marry someone you don't want to marry? The answer is absolutely not. So then what do? Sometimes I need to mediate. Sometimes I need to involve a third party. Sometimes I need to just overlook certain options. This person could have been great for me, but because of X, Y, or Z reason, it doesn't seem like it's working out, and that's okay. Because happiness is not attached to a certain individual. Happiness is something felt within. It might happen in this relationship or that, but these are things you really want to discuss. This type of question, I advise, go to someone you trust. If you trust your local imam, then go speak to that person. If you have a mentor, advisor, someone in your family, outside of your family, try to get advice, because your situation might need to be dealt with in a certain way. Maybe your parents are justified for not wanting this person. Maybe they're not. Allahu A'lam.
We have time for one more question, or
if it's a quick one.
So one question was related to the sunnah prayers, just to go into the hadith, in regards to the hadith that whoever prays 12 sunnah prayers a day, Allah will build a house for them in Jannah. How can you complete your 12 sunnah prayers during Friday? Because when you go to Salat al-Jum'ah, you pray, you don't pray, sometimes you can pray 4 rak'ahs sunnah before Salat al-Dhuhr, and then you pray 2 rak'ahs after Salat al-Dhuhr, which is part of, to get to your 12 sunnah prayers. How can you do that on Friday? Are there any other sunnah prayers that you can pray just to make sure you get the 12?
You do them on Friday just like you do them in any other day. So by the way, this hadith is an authentic hadith. من صلى لله في يوم 12 ركعة بنى الله له بيتا في الجنة. Whoever prays 12 rak'ahs for Allah in a day, then Allah will build for him a home in Jannah. Some of them say that this refers to, this is the sunan that are mu'akkada, the emphasized sunnah. Those are the ones that the Prophet was consistent with doing throughout his lifetime. But it's not necessary that it has to just be limited to those. So it's 12 rak'ahs, but where are those 12 rak'ahs in terms of the emphasized rawatib? They are 2 before Fajr, and then some of them say 2 before Dhuhr, 2 after, or 4 before Dhuhr and 2 after. There's both opinions, and that would give us so far a total of what? That would give us a total of 8 if we do 4 before, 2 after. And then for Asr, there's no sunnah mu'akkada. There's a sunnah, but it's not mu'akkada. It's not an emphasis. There's a hadith that says, may Allah have mercy upon one who prays 4 before Asr. So, but they're not mu'akkada. Then you have Maghrib 2 after, 10, Isha 2 after. You would do the same on Jumu'ah. You could pray sunnah before Jumu'ah. That's what you should be doing as soon as you enter the masjid, to pray the sunnah before unless you come in when the Imam has already started, then that has a different directive, that you pray 2 quick rak'ahs and then sit down. So that would be the answer to this. If you come before the khatib starts, then it's just like any other day. Yeah.
Jazakallah khair. I think we're gonna end here. Jazakumullah khair everyone for attending, for your questions. Apologies if we didn't get to all the questions. Inshallah, we're planning to have some more of these Q&A sessions in the coming weeks. And inshallah, we'll see everybody next week for the Friday forum.
جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. Inshallah, we'll see you guys next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. If we could just move the barrier back to where it was, and the brothers, you could come to the first row. Let's move this table, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.